Listen, the Spirit is calling by the Reverend John Saxon. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of day and the darkness of night. It calls us in times of hope and despair. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name and many names. The Spirit of life, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter. It's calling you and it's calling me. It's calling us to greater wholeness, to a greater connection, to greater service, to greater love. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and to dance and to sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. It's calling us into community. It's calling us to the greater life of all. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling.
As we light our chalice, we share our church covenant. We promise to listen and learn together with compassion, curiosity, and an open mind, engage in creating a warm and welcoming community, work together and beyond our walls to address social and environmental changes, and with our time, talent, and treasures support our church and its mission.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Fiona and Vivian. It's so great to see you. You're getting so big. Oh my goodness. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Pam Romantic, and I serve the Unitarian Church in Hinsdale, Illinois. I'm so glad we can be together this morning, even if only through our screens. With the virus raging all around us, I hope you're taking care, and I hope you find a space of peace and calm, fellowship, and maybe even a little inspiration this morning. Each of us are called to the greater life, to that ground of being in which we know ourselves as connected and indispensable, as part of a wholeness that will never let us go. If you enjoy today's service, I hope you will share it via YouTube with someone you know that might need to be reminded that they matter, that they have value and worth in a world that constantly is telling all of us that we are not enough. Our church, luckily, even the middle of this pandemic, still has a lot of things going on. So I encourage each of you to visit our website, which is www.hinsdaleunitarian.org, and follow us on social media. If you're new and would like to receive our regular communications, you can leave your information in the chat box or click on the contact button on the YouTube or on our website. Now, each week, folks who are on the Zoom call are invited to stay after the service for a brief coffee hour. We split into chat rooms, we respond to the message, we can get to know new people, and we can catch up on all of our shared lives. I'd like to remind you that this afternoon, there's going to be a virtual climate grief service at 3 p.m. It's a time to lament the loss and the destruction of our planet and to find solidarity in our grief so that we can find ways to move forward together. Excuse me, to supportive. And then on Saturday coming up, we're going to be having one of our biggest fundraisers of the year, which supports all the great work that's done in this community. So it'll be on Saturday, the 21st at 4 p.m. So note the new time, 4 p.m. And it's called a Zoom raiser, which, as you might imagine, means it's on Zoom. Pam Fodor, John Cooperwriter, Nancy Krantz have been working like many long, crazy hours to offer this wide selection of over 60 items to bid on this coming in the afternoon, Saturday in the afternoon. We thank everybody who's made a donation because the proceeds of this event are an essential part of supporting the great work of this church. Pam and John are going to share a little bit more at the end of the service right before the coffee hour, so make sure you stay on for that part. We're also going to have a special worship service next Sunday, even though we can't be together to make our customary stone soup. So I'm inviting you now to please send us in pictures of your family sharing a meal and send in things that each one of you are thankful for. And we'll use that when we put together our service for next week. Now, in our Caring Circle news, we're sending big love to Sarah Joyner, who suffered a dog bite and is having complications. And it's just one of those sad, painful, awful things. And Sarah, we're so sorry. But we are happy to share that Verna O'Brien is doing better, and she's moved to the Burgess Rehab Center to regain her strength. And both Verna and Mom remain in our thoughts and prayers. And finally, Kathy Salzano's daughter, Rena, had an emergency appendectomy on Thursday. They're grateful she got there soon. Things turned out okay. And Kathy has started treatment for cancer and so much appreciates the love and the support that you've been sending her and will continue as she goes through her treatment. Now, a little bit later in our service, we'll hold a space for meditation and prayer. So if you know of somebody who needs support or you do yourself, please type your intention in all caps in the chat box so we can know, or just go ahead and contact the office. So let us know how we can respond and help support you. Today, I want to thank Dave Lloyd, who is our worship associate this week. And of course, every week we thank Jamie Bassman, Suzanne Williams, Jean Schaefer, who make this service possible. Jamie's creator of those wonderful montage and music videos you see almost every week with his beautiful piano playing. Later on in this service, Kathy Blanford is going to be interviewing Ronaldo Hudson. So I just want to give some context. Hudson was released from prison after serving 37 years of a life sentence without parole. We're going to hear his inspiring story and how faith allowed him to grow and transform his life into one of service and genuine care for his fellow humans. This is just a short bit, but the rest of it is all up on the website. So I encourage everybody to go watch it because it's an amazing interview. In the same vein, Suzanne Williams is going to share her experiences of being a pen pal with an incarcerated citizen as part of our prison pen pal ministry here in the church. And so finally, if you're inspired by today's work, by today's service, and you want to do more with your fellow church members, and you can brighten the day of someone who is incarcerated in Illinois prison this season, because they're not going to be able to be visited by loved ones during the holiday season due to the COVID-19 virus. So you could send some holiday cards. Contact Kathy Blanford, Tracy Olson, or send an email to socialjustice@hinsdaleunitarian.org to get some names. It's really simple. You can write a simple, friendly message on a holiday card or 2 or 3, put the stamp on the envelope, and drop it off at a basket outside the office. We'll address the card, mail it for you, and you can make a big difference in somebody's day. Please consider doing this simple thing this week, as it takes quite a long time for mail to get to people in prison. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Thanks to Jamie for persevering and getting us online. Thanks to everyone for your patience as we still celebrate this amazing community. Now join in our first hymn, What Wondrous Love.
Morning, all. Let's find out what our tool of the week is. It's a chalkboard and a piece of chalk. Chalk and the chalkboard represent the democratic process. We've had a wonderful representation of that just these past couple of weeks. Chalk can mark a vote. Unitarian Universalism is a faith that values the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process, both within our congregations and in society at large. We believe that people should have a say in the things that concern them, and voting is one way that people have a say. Take care, be well.
This reading is from Reflections on the Winter of the Heart by Reverend Gary James. In our generation, to mention spirituality is to evoke images of the long day suns of summer. Rarely does the storm of a troubled heart receive its chance to be heard in most Americans' approach to spirituality. We describe ourselves, Unitarian Universalists, as the children of the Enlightenment, optimistic, forward-looking, engineers of the future, creating the world of tomorrow, progressively constructing that perfect system in which all shadows flee away and all people are made good and happy. Pragmatic to a fault, we like to shine a bright light on the problem and get it solved. The journey I want to take leads to a different kind of enlightenment, an enlightenment beyond enlightenment. On this journey, going means letting go of the light. It's not all that hard to get enlightened. What is much more difficult is to keep giving up our sense of the world, so that the world and all of its seasons, especially winter, the season of cold and darkness, can come to us on its own terms, with its vast, pitiless, loving intelligence. In the winter of the heart, one is invited to discover a faith that grapples with pain and uncertainty, grapples with evil, loss, and the mystery of death, and in so doing, discovers hope and a deep joy on the winter fallow landscape. Thus ends the reading.
I invite you to settle into your chairs. Let your shoulders drop. Take a deep breath in, and then another deep breath out. I have a question for you this morning. Where are you today? It's a dangerous question in these COVID times, because maybe you're feeling so afraid. There's so much uncertainty in our country, unprecedented irregularities in the peaceful transition of power, a country of divided families and alienated neighbors. Perhaps you're feeling lonely or isolated or even forgotten. A long, dark winter looms ahead. How will we stay safe, both in body and in spirit? Perhaps you're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted. The quality and feel of time seems to have shifted. There's never enough, and yet there's too much on our hands all at the same time. You might be managing children's classes or struggling with expanding workloads or just finding insufficient support in your life right now. Maybe you're numb. Maybe you feel so disconnected that even naming your emotions seems more than's possible right now. It can feel too much, too much, too much. Where are you today? You are here. You are an essential member of the human family. You live on this blue-green marble we call Earth, in this bit of country where trees shed their leaves and birds call out to one another, and there are green spaces to walk and to breathe. We're here. You have a brain and a heart and a body and a spirit. You breathe in and out. Your heart beats to the rhythm of stars in their orbits. I pray today that you have enough to fill your body with sustaining food, enough to keep you warm and dry, enough to connect you with the outside world. Each of us carries a burden. I know I do, and I'm sure that you do too. But you know, while the world weighs upon us, we also have a deep and abiding connection to the wholeness and the holiness of life. It's found in each beating heart, in every breath of that life. Where are you today? You are here, in a community of seekers and sharers and lovers of justice. You are here, joined by technology unimaginable 50 years ago. You are here, in a caring and encouraging, in an inspiring and a supportive community, no less real, because today it is virtual. It's a place you can call home, where you will be held in a love that is strong and fierce, a love that is real. You are here, and I'm so glad that's true. Breathe. You are home.
You know, friends, Renato, was recently released from an Illinois prison where he'd been serving time for the last 37 years. His story of rehabilitation while he was incarcerated is transformative and powerful, and he's here to share his story with us today. Renato, after the death penalty was abolished, you got sentenced essentially to life in prison.
Yes, life without the possibility of parole.
Without the possibility of parole, and you knew you were going to have to be spending the rest of your life in prison. And I'm wondering if you can tell us how that felt and how you managed to move your life in such a positive direction.
Well, I have to confess, I did not know that I would spend life in prison. What I knew was that God is a God of hope. And the sentence of life without the possibility of parole says that God is not in control. And so that was enough to make me say, the devil is a lie, because the Bible says hope deferred makes the heart sick. And so I was determined to trust God and say, I don't know. I did not know what would happen, but I know what was possible with trusting God. So I did not take the position of saying, you know I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life. What I said is, I know I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. But I know a God that says if you confess your sins, he's faithful and just to forgive them. And so death row in that experience was really, it's still with me.
Is it?
It's still with me, absolutely.
How do you mean?
I appreciate every second of right now because of what I remember happened.
So it makes a difference to people on the inside to have people communicating with them?
Absolutely. That's why Jesus told us to visit the prisoners, right? And so it's a biblical commission.
Yeah.
We've been commissioned by God. I'm saying that I pray that everyone that hear this tape decide, I will adopt me an inmate. I will adopt me a broken person, a broken citizen, because we're not inmates. Yeah. We're people who've made bad decisions.
Well, you know,
But I remember a time when I referred to Bill Ryan as a white devil.
Because you didn't have good feelings about people.
I didn't know any white people that I can trust. I hadn't met the love of people because I saw things from black and white.
Wow.
And when you're not educated and when you're not cultivated, then you don't understand that it's a heart condition that made people hate. And it's a heart condition that makes people love. Once I start seeing that, I will never tell people I don't see you as, I don't see white people, black or white. That's not true.
No.
I do see you. Sure. But beyond that, beyond your melon or lack thereof, right? I'm listening for your heart. I'm listening for, are you a kind person that represents the residue of the gospel?
You did a lot to help fellow folks that were in prison while you were in there, right? The Building Blocks program?
That's one of the programs. That's the most recent program. The Building Block program went from a conversation to a program that's actually was about to be rolled out across the state. The program that we started helped, I wrote the blueprint, but I'm only one of the participants that started it.
Oh,
I'm important. It's important that I share with people. It's my baby, if anyone asks me, because I helped to bring it into fruition. But it's a combination of so many people putting forth their brilliance to say, how do we as broken people figure out how to share with people who are in charge of us? Here's what you can do to help me to be better. And then the funny thing that ended up happening was some of the hardest staff, some of the meanest staff, those are the people we requested to be in the program with us. And we won them over.
yeah.
And we won them over. And they ended up sharing their testimonies on tape about, man, I thought these guys was playing until I saw the manifestation of people changing. I'm going to remember to say, hey, if you could write a letter, if you can get on GTL and just begin to email a person and say, hey, listen, this church love you, you know, and we're praying for you, you know, because it makes a difference. It really does.
We'll work on finding some ways to do that, maybe sending Christmas cards or something like that, so that just letting people know that we're thinking of them. We only have a few minutes left, but I'm wondering if you might want to share just a little bit about what your life has been like since you have been out.
Well, I have to tell you, my life since I've been free has been really, really amazing. Like, I haven't wanted for anything. Like, God has provided more than I could have ever imagined. The transition has been almost seamless. You know, the biggest hurdle that I had was the fact that they fingerprinted me and they knew who I was for 37 years in prison. But the moment they kicked me out of the door, they had no idea who I was. So I went 2 months without having an identity until I found out. I just got my Social Security card Friday. I had received my state ID Saturday. So I officially went to work for IPP yesterday.
Thank you, Renato. It has been such a pleasure to have you with us today and sharing your powerful story. We really appreciate you.
Hi, I'm Shar Cepek. As a member of our church, I recognize the importance of reaching out and welcoming everyone, no exceptions. The Night Ministry, a Chicago non-denominational social services organization, shares that philosophy. The homeless, the hungry, those that are not welcomed even by their own families will find a meal, medical care, a warm bed, and people who are supportive. I know that your donation will be put to good use by the dedicated staff at the Night Ministry. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Darren Howard, serving as treasurer on the board of the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. This is the time in our service when we remember the good things the church does in the world, and we invite you to help support our work. You can go to our website at www.hinsdaleunitarian.org and click on the Donate button in the weekly news and notes, or you can simply mail your check to the church office at 17 West Maple in Hinsdale. It's important to me that I give as much as I can to the church because it has done so much for me with the light it brings to my life and the light it brings to the world. We sincerely thank you for your support and encourage you to also share with the church as much as you can, even in these difficult times. Even though we can't be together right now, I invite you to say our offering words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world.
I have communicated with my pen pal now for a couple of years. We are both white suburban women in our early 60s, and she has been in prison at the Logan Correctional Center for over 20 years, convicted of murder. When I first realized who my pen pal was, I was surprised. I remembered the crime for which she was convicted, and I wasn't sure how I felt about establishing this relationship. I struggled with my limited middle-class suburban worldview to understand how she could have done the things she was convicted of doing. But I started writing to her using a pseudonym, and as our relationship unfolded, I began to know her and learn about the events that led to her incarceration from her perspective. As I came to understand the personal hell that my pen pal has lived with in the years since that day, my empathy for her has grown tremendously. She's a very creative person who finds ways to make beautiful things in spite of the limitations placed on her by her environment. From time to time, she sends me lovely little origami creations she has made, and some of her larger work has in the past been featured on the Parole Illinois website. The more I've come to know her, the more I realize that we truly aren't very different from one another, save for decisions that any of us might have made under a similar set of circumstances. A few months ago, I confessed to my pen pal that I was using a pseudonym, and she was very understanding about it. We share a UU sensibility about the world, and I am so much better for my relationship with her.
This reading is from Steps to Personal Transformation by Amara Rose. The quest to discover and live our truth is the hero's journey, a sacred pilgrimage home to ourselves. It's the high road and a rigorous one. We may try to camouflage our fear of the unknown with bravado, workaholism, or apathy. There's another way, following the path of the heart. Our resistance is the refusal of the call. Change whispers in our ear, and we attempt a high-tech tune-out. Call waiting, call forwarding, on hold, voicemail. How do we answer this call to reclaim our connection to what's true for us? We start by giving ourselves permission to be passionate, to dream beyond our self-imposed boundaries. The poet Rilke encourages us to live a while in the question. You're entering a corridor between the worlds. It's okay to not know what happens next. Marcel Proust said, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Look with the eyes of wonder, like a child. Breathe deeply into the mystery. Goethe said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Once you commit to change, a confluence of forces moves to assist you. The key to integrating change in our lives is have big dreams, take baby steps. Gandhi said, you must be the change you wish to see. It's a lifelong process of self-actualization, and it's our reason for being here. Thus ends the reading.
Thank you, Dave. You are here. That was the title of our meditation this morning, Here. It's the place where the present moment happens, here. Now we can get lost from here. We can be living in a far distant past, replaying moments when we did or said something that we weren't happy about. Or we can be really reliving past glories to shut out our current unpleasant realities. We can live our whole lives waiting for what comes next, always anticipating that next week or next month or next year is going to be better. Often, we live anywhere but here, anywhere but in our bodies in this present moment, in this place. But you know, here is very important. Here is where we find our soul. Theologian Francis Weller explains, I don't use the word soul in a religious sense, but rather the way psychologists Carl Jung and James Hilleman and the romantic poets like Keats and Wordsworth and Blake use it, to speak of the experience of depth in our lives. Soul invites the marginal, the excluded, and the unwelcome pieces of ourselves into our attention. Soul is often found at the edges, both in culture and in our lives. Soul takes us down to the places of our shared humanity, such as sorrow and longing and suffering and death. End quote. In general, we are not a society that pays much attention to soul. Many of us just skim on the surface of life, encouraged by society that's always calling us to the light, to the ease and comfort, and away from those things which may alter our participation in the commercialized world. We are taught to avoid the depths from a very young age. Don't cry, man up, be a big girl. So many ways that we are taught that paying attention to our inner life, especially when it's challenging, is not okay. As we grow, we begin to avoid those deeper parts of ourselves, the very parts that offer us wisdom and growth and that peace that our heart is just longing to find. Weller goes on, we go numb to try to cope with the fact that we have not been granted what we need to thrive. The levels of addiction in our society are off the charts. And I'm not just talking about alcohol and drugs. I'm talking about shopping, working, sex. Addictions are an attempt to cope with intolerable states. The meager lives we are asked to live, in which we are often reduced to earning a living, are themselves intolerable. We are meant to have a more sensuous, imaginative, and creative existence. As children, we are enchanted with the world. Yet, as adults, we end up, as the poet Mary Oliver said, breathing just a little and calling it a life. That's the anesthesia. End quote. That breathing a little, maybe by shopping or drinking or just being overly busy, might serve the economy, but I don't think it serves any of us. You might recall that none of the great teachers from any age ever advised, just go shopping. Because shopping, purchasing, acquiring has replaced religion in many circles as the opiate of the masses. And it ends up being destructive both to our psyches and our planet. The lie is that if we just get that perfect outfit, that amazing tool, or that piece of technology, that expensive meal, everything's going to be good. And it might feel good for a fleeting moment. But then, surprise, surprise, we are back here in this moment with ourselves. How do we find true peace? How can we be happy being here? The Buddha taught that all of life is dukkha. We translate it as suffering, but it really doesn't mean that we are only here to suffer and should just get over it. If we're going to suffer anyway, we might as well go shop, right? No. Dukkha means suffering that comes from wanting something else than what you have. The angst, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, the dissatisfaction that so many of us feel with the world as it is. It's not new. It's been the human condition for thousands of years. It's why, if we want to escape that particular suffering, we need to look to our soul. Weller continues, soul requires that we be authentic, revealing what lies behind the image that we try to show to the world, including our flaws and peculiarities. Soul doesn't care about perfection or getting it right. It cares about participation. Soul is revealed in dreams and images and in our most intimate conversations. It's revealed in our desire to live a life of meaning and purpose. End quote. I believe that you are here today because you desire to live that fully engaged life. Maybe through community, maybe through service, maybe through being inspired to do the hard work of spiritual exploration and find your own truth. Every tradition teaches that this path, the path grounded in truth, in self, is not an easy path. And when you stop to think about it, You know in your bones it's true. It has often been through my darkest and most challenging times that I found my own soul's voice. Times in high school when I felt lost and unincluded and spent time lost in the chapel in prayer and meditation. Struggles in my first marriage, which called me to read and explore and find a deeper truth, a truth which eventually led me to the ministry. Or the struggle that I experienced in the loss of my parents, which uncovered patterns of behavior that I never recognized before and offered me a way forward to a fuller understanding of who I wanted to be and how I should act in the world. This afternoon, we're going to be having a climate grief service. Climate grief is a thing. It comes from the knowledge that the earth upon which we live and breathe and have our being has been broken and that everything is changing. Our service this afternoon is going to present a way to be present to this here, to this painful reality, a place to stop shoving down that suffering that comes from knowing our earth is hurting. Shoving down the pain really doesn't help. It only offers a distorted and inauthentic experience where fear always lies just below the surface. Together, sharing and grieving, digging into the lament, the sadness that was in our bodies, offers us the opportunity to let go of the place we want, but to fully embrace and even celebrate where we are, to celebrate this here, no matter what it looks like. I hope you'll join us. Now, earlier, we saw Kathy Blanford interviewing Ronaldo Hudson, a man who spent 37 years in prison before being released this spring. Ronaldo killed a man at the age of 19, and in his own words, acknowledged and regrets that day. But his life has turned around, and he's become the model kind of person, the model of transformation that is possible when you embrace the fullness of your life. In asking Governor Pritzker for clemency for Ronaldo, Bill Wilson, who's been joining us recently, was his pen pal and his friend of 15 years. And he wrote, he was a bad guy when he was 19. He was a gangbanger, a drug abuser, a problem, and a discard for our society who committed a horrific crime. As a child, he had no positive guidance. He lived in poverty. He avoided school and endured abuse and mistreatment by those who should have cared for him. His brother shot him and killed 2 other members of his family. Not a good start for a child. End quote. Not a good start for anyone. But Ronaldo found a way through. It started with a warden who offered to take 1 day off his year-long stint in solitary confinement for every Bible verse that he learned. With that motivation, Ronaldo started learning and reciting Bible verses with such enthusiasm that he ended up only serving 90 days of that year-long solitary sentence. And while in the beginning, he was reading scripture for only self-serving reasons, and he started with the very shortest verse possible, which was, Jesus wept. Ronaldo soon found himself drawn into the story of this Jesus, the story of a man who loved his fellow humans and who advocated not judging, but loving. It was a story that spoke of pain and loss. It spoke of the kind of suffering Ronaldo had experienced, and it created a way for him to come to terms with his life and to begin to live it even more fully, even within the confines of a prison cell. Now, I encourage you to watch the entire interview with Kathy and Ronaldo on our website. He is a remarkable man, full of passion and energy, fully acknowledging the wrong he's done, but also knowing from the depths of his bones that that is not his whole story. Like the examples of people that we talked about last Sunday, people who lived fully into the eros of their lives, people like Mother Teresa and Janis Joplin and Lady Diana. Ronaldo has tapped into that source of life, that ground of being. And you know, he emanates a joy and an engagement that can't help but inspire others. After coming to terms with who he was and what he did, he transformed himself into a person who found ways to help and support and encourage those all around him, even the guards and wardens that he came to know. His passion, in Kierkegaard's words, was the will to do the one thing. And that one thing became his faith in Jesus, his trust in the teaching of a loving God. He took to heart Matthew 25's reminder that whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. Ronaldo lived the least of these, and he knew that life, spirit, God, was there for anyone to find and experience. Now, I know that sometimes Unitarian Universalists can be suspect of people who preach the gospel. Like an earlier version of Ronaldo, we see hypocrisy and sometimes judgment in many who claim to follow Jesus. And it's not wrong. You could do all the right things for the wrong reason. Your passion can have all the notes and still not to be able to enter into the fullness of the song. People who follow a path in order to affirm their own rightness and the wrongness of others are coming from the place of small self, the ego self, the self that only feels good because it judges itself better than others, the self that says, 5 more toys, I win, or that anyone who doesn't think like me is wrong. But this is not restricted to Christians. Unitarian Universalists can fall into the very same trap. The name you give to your passion doesn't matter. What matters is whether it is calling you to connection, to compassion, to kindness, to empathy. What matters is the motivation that you have for the path that you are traveling. Is it calling you to the fullness of participation into the whole of life? Or is it simply giving you an illusion of safety and security and a space to revel in your own superiority? Ronaldo's faith is one of connection to the whole of life. And I invite any of you struggling to open your minds and hearts to hear the familiar terms with new ears. When you hear Jesus substitute truth, recognize that God is that enlivening source which powers the fullness of the universe. Understand salvation as a recognition of our interconnection in the web of life, of our being able to remember that we are all connected and can never be separated from the ground of being. Rumi reminds us that there are many ways to kneel and kiss the ground, many ways to dive within and find the rich, nourishing source of our own being, our own here. Ronaldo's passion for life, expressed through the lens of Christianity, is one which invites each of us to find our own passion and our own connection to that life-giving source. He truly walked through the dark valley and yet found joy and peace and wonder and connection. And if a man imprisoned for 37 years can find a here filled with gratitude and hope, can find a way to devote his whole life to loving the world and evangelizing for its salvation, perhaps we can too. The path will look different for each and every one of us, because we are each unique expressions of that connected life force, that spirit of mystery and wonder that some people call God. Luckily for us, there are many guides on the journey, many who have found a glimpse, a brief respite from the dukkha of life. Many different spiritual paths and practices can lead us to peace and satisfaction in this particular moment, in this particular place, in this particular here of our lives. Where are you? Are you free to find the connection to this present moment again and again and again? Yes, you are. Amen and blessed be.
The Geometries of Our Walled Gardens by the Reverend John Gibb Millspaugh. All too often, we pace the geometries of our walled gardens, believing that we are traversing the whole of creation. With spirits of discovery, let us uncover the mysteries nested in our routines. With the eagerness of children, let us seek out the secrets unfolding on our peripheral vision. Let us behold each of our fellow creatures with reverence. Let us greet each day with praise and thanksgiving. For life is a gift of incomprehensible magnitude. Our lives are voyages with unknowable destinations. Along the way, let us meet, kiss, challenge, and support one another. Let us fashion a network of mutuality and extend it to the larger world. In these ways, we forge lives of goodness and beauty. In these ways, we know the life of prayer. Thus ends the reading. Please join in our closing hymn.
We extinguish its flame, but not the light of its truth. We warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts, and we share with all the world.
There Are Miles Behind You by the Reverend Andrew Pakula. There are miles behind you and many more yet to come as you journey towards wholeness. May all that is good and true guide your way. May the light of love lighten each step. And may the miracle that is life be ever at your side.